I do want to talk to Tim. Haven't heard from Tim in a minute. This is Tim from Washington. Tim, happy to hear from you again. What's going on?
Hey Dan, how are you? A lot going on actually. I've been watching the news and the last few months in particular, but definitely the last few years. Let me preface this by saying that I am, by every account, a Jesus mythicist. And so I believe that everything having to do with Christianity is as mythical as Odin and Zeus and Osiris and all of the others that we have always relegated to mythology level. And what breaks my heart is my community, the LGBTQIA community, in particular, my trans brothers and sisters, have been attacked with policies that are all based on this mythology, this belief in this made up story out of a bunch of books that are essentially, as far as I'm concerned, Aesop fables. And it breaks my heart because, the recent attack on poor little Dex just hurts my heart. And I'm so sad that we have to deal with making policies based on mythology. And so I wanted to call into your show so that I can vent about that a little bit, because it really, really frustrates me.
Yeah, just so we give some context for people. So Next is the name of a non-binary student that was recently killed in Oklahoma, and there is an investigation as to exactly what happened there. I don't know what's latest on that actually, so I don't want to factually misreport anything. But what we do know is that this was a student that was harassed for their trans identity. And a lot of people are talking about this being the reason as to their death. Of course, there's people disputing that, right? But in no uncertain terms, this student was definitely harassed. As far as everything that's come out so far, their identity was definitely questioned, and it may or may not have been part of the death. Again, I just don't want to misreport if there's anything else that's come up. But what I've seen, it seems that there is evidence to believe that that's the case. And I don't doubt it, because how many people have had stories of being harassed just for being trans, let alone being teenagers and talking about their identities more openly. Even though we live in a time where people are being more open about their identities, particularly young people, that doesn't mean the level of hate has necessarily gone down. It's just a lot of people are less afraid to say it, right? So a lot of people that are hiding their hate instead, because the dominant culture is slowly shifting little by little towards saying hey, being hateful in that kind of way is wrong. But it's not everywhere. There is this myth that said, oh, America is this progressive place now, and LGBT people can live free and happy and do whatever the hell they want. And they can't. And they can't because of stories like this one. So it is really unfortunate. Yeah. And it's really sad that there are people that will cling to an ideology because it justifies their hate. And Christianity is definitely one of those potential ideologies that justifies it. And I grieve with you, Tim. I don't know what to say about it other than it is a tragedy.
And it also hurts my heart. A few months ago, I heard the story of the family in, I believe it was from Texas, after there were laws that were made that, and I say Texas, it could be any one of those. There are 3 or 4 states that have put it into law that gender affirming care for a child, for a teenager, is child abuse, and a family had to uproot themselves from the state and move to a state that is more, that doesn't have that particular policy. And I mean, that moving within a town can break a person. I just moved into my own apartment, and I am struggling trying to make all my bills just from the move. I can imagine moving a whole family out of your state so that you can give your child gender-affirming care so that they can actually be who they are.
Yeah.
And again, it's a disruption of a family. It's heartbreaking and absolutely heart-wrenching to hear these stories of these people that are just, and I know that there are some right-wing commentators that were really upset that Fox News did a story about a family who has a 14-year-old trans son, and when he was 3 or 4, he was actually showing himself to be, and I wish his first name was Ryland, and they did a whole story.
I as soon as you said it, I know what you're talking about, because it's like the only time Fox News has ever been nice to LGBT people in like a humanizing way. And it's really weird to watch it, because it's like, oh, this gets kind of strange. And they got so much flack for it. I'm pretty sure they've never done it again. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Anyway, I've seen what you're talking about, Tim.
It was a beautiful story, and all of a sudden here we are. Oh my God, we need God's way going. Well, you know what? God's a myth, and what we need is we need humanity to show. Your last caller was talking about compassion. We're not showing compassion to our trans brothers and sisters.
No,
forcing them, or by simply bullying them, for lack of a better word.
Well, I'll tell you this, Tim, and then I want Infidel to give their point too. Is that if your church, if you're a Greg out there, right, and you're listening, and you're thinking about all this stuff, if your church isn't talking about how they can better help the LGBT community, what is the purpose of your church? And I'm not saying it should be only helping LGBT people. What I'm saying is, if you can't recognize that the source of violence that occurs to LGBT people, particularly LGBT youth, doesn't stem at all from your religious beliefs, if you don't even see where that connection is made, how can you understand where the opposite happens? How can I trust you in knowing what compassion is if you can't even understand where it fails? Right. And this is a failure. And we obviously can't blame it squarely on Christianity, but it has a heavy burden to bear. Right. In all of this, it is complicit, as long as churches exist that continue to, if not harass, then at least not even talk about the issues that are occurring in our country from people who think and look and dress just like them. Then what is even the point of having a church and a group of people that say that you're compassionate and you want what's best for everybody in the world if you're not going to talk about it? I don't know. It's very very sad to see. Infidel, please.
Tim, you really hit home with this, because having a gender fluid child, it really gets very personal for me. But when I heard the state representative from Oklahoma talking about Next and saying that, we have a Republican supermajority here and we're a Christian state, and I'm going to vote with my constituents, and that's why we don't want this filth here. That is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about, religion and it perpetuating nothing but hate, because this is driven by, more often than not, by religious leaders. They're hammering this home, and they're making political gain. They're getting political capital on what literally at this point is caused a death, and not the first one, and it won't be the last one. We're looking at a cycle that's going to continue, because as long as we have people that are willing to excuse the inexcusable, we're just going to keep seeing this. And when you talk about a state like Oklahoma, I don't know if you're aware of this case, but there was a case here recently where a young man wanted to change his gender in the school in their database, and went through the courts. Family supported him, went to the courts, got it approved, and the superintendent of education there, Ryan Walters, was so gung-ho against it that he called an emergency session to get an emergency rule in to make sure that that was not allowed. And to me, I wish people would step on the fact of, let's be compassionate. Let's be aware that what we do does impact people. You know, you mentioned the people who don't have, or moving other states because their well-being of their child is literally in danger, and that's completely unacceptable. And I think it's important that we point these people out and not let them get away with this, because when we say that these things cost people their lives, we're not talking hyperbole. We mean that literally, and that has to stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Tim, anything else you want to add?
No. Infidel brought up Ryan Walters, and it's like, oh God, don't even get me started on that one. So yeah, I am in complete agreement with everything that Infidel just said, because, well, obviously because I started this conversation, right? But yeah, it's just breaking my heart that you know, we've come so far in the LGBTQIA plus community and with policies, and then I've watched us move forward to even Obergefell, and us being able to marry whom we choose. And it looks like we're taking 3 giant steps back after these 6 giant steps forward.
Yeah.
And it's just breaking my heart. And so yeah, that's basically what I came on to say. So
I hear you, Tim. Yeah, I hear you. I'll tell you this: in my church communities, we never, ever said, "Hey, let's help the LGBT people around us." And if we did bring up LGBT people, it was never in positive terms, right? Again, that's just my anecdote. That's just one lived experience of Christians, but how many does that match? Right? You can't say I'm in the minority. You cannot, you absolutely, no uncertain terms, say I'm the minority. I think that's a lot of people's experiences. I'm aware that progressive church groups and systems exist and do want to help for LGBT causes. And you know what? That's all fine and dandy, but you're always going to be in the minority if you fight in that.
I mean, I was yeah. You know that I was an ex-gay minister. And I was in the church way back before I was 38 and decided to begin my deconversion. So yeah, I know exactly. We are not the exception. We're not the fringe. We've experienced it, and we know it. We've experienced it from both sides. Well, you know, and so yeah, it's sad.
It is sad. It is sad. But Tim, I think there is some hope, because you and I are having a conversation about it right now on the internet for several thousand people to see, and that wasn't a thing a couple of years ago, right? Not just talking about ACA shows. So I was just talking about the conversation in general, right? That is a sign of something, you know, as weak as that may be. That is something. That's not an avenue by which people were able to express themselves, mainstream media or otherwise. So yeah, I am hopeful that things can still change. I am doubtful that it will ever be perfect, but I am hopeful that more and more people are starting to see things our way. That, hey, this is wrong, and that this is something that should be stopped and should be fought against. But progress is not linear. It's not always a straight line. It's not always just, oh, we have all these rights and we have all this acceptance and it's going to be that way forever. And I think history has shown that time and time again. So we always have to keep fighting, unfortunately. But I'll do it. I'll keep fighting. I ain't stopping.